In my first video, I showed you how to make a small artist panel to professional standards. Today I'm going to show you a dirty little trick to get the job done, even if you don't have a nail gun and router. So, let's hit the bumper and get down to business. Yeah? Here's what you'll need to follow along with this video. A full list of tools will be down below in the description. I'm not endorsed by any of the brands you see here. This is just what I happen to use on all of my woodworking projects. We begin as always by cutting, then marking side one of the cradle frame pieces on the miter sled. Remember, your cradle frame pieces need to be slightly oversized at this point. I'm making a 16-inch panel, so my stock is rough cut to about 17-inch lengths before I cut any miters. Now that all side 1 miters have been cut, we mark the straight and angle cut reference lines for side 2. And sneak up on the cut as demonstrated in my previous videos. Next you're going to need some wood glue, a square, and your corner clamps to begin gluing the cradle frame together. Position all the pieces roughly in place by matching any side 1 with a side 2, and slide your clamps into the approximate position they'll need to be in, to start applying pressure. Coat the ends of the miters with a fair amount of wood glue, and apply pressure to the corner clamps until the glue fully cures. Be careful not to apply so much pressure that the wood starts to bow. Make sure the cradle frame is perfectly square before setting it aside to dry. It has to be, if you want this dirty build trick to work. Next, I set the blade height to cut the luan surface. Now, there's two things I want to point out here. The first is safety. It's absolutely critical to have the rising knife attached to the back of the blade in order to cut thin sheet goods, like luan plywood. It keeps the wood from spinning back into the blade once it's pushed through. The second thing is, we need at least one corner of the luan to be cut at a perfect 90-degree angle to match the cradle frame. The two adjacent edges that are perfectly square to one another will be what we use to cheat the system. If your fence is off being parallel to the blade, make the adjustments to it first before making the cuts. Before we glue this up, I like to inspect the surface panels for rough edges. Since we have overhang that needs to be trimmed, those are the sides I want to cut off. The surface should be slightly larger than your cradle frame. We need a little overhang on at least two sides of the panel. My surface is cut to 16 3/8 of an inch, square. We're going to fit the surface flush with the frame on two sides and glue it into position, leaving the opposite two sides with the overhang. Gather up your clamps, wood glue, and some small scrap pieces of wood, just in case. Apply wood glue to the cradle frame and spread it around as evenly as you can. This is where you'll want to have a screwdriver and damp rag nearby to wipe away any squeeze-out glue before it hardens. Align the two flush sides of the surface with the cradle frame, and begin applying clamps there first. No matter what happens, we don't want those two sides moving at all. Once they're set into position, clamped, and set aside to dry. As you can see, the bow in the surface wood is very pronounced on this end. So I opt for the scrap wood and clamp method to help solve that problem. Be sure to clean up all the glue, especially on the inside of the cradle frame. Just because you won't see it when the art is hanging on the wall, doesn't mean it doesn't matter. With all the glue dried and the clamps removed, I take one final measurement of the panel frame to make sure everything is still square. And it is. I'm going to set my saw fence to 16 1/32 of an inch. You'll see why in just a minute. But I want you to pay attention to the saw blade height here. Notice how it is higher than the cradle frame. That's because if my measurement is off, and I end up cutting into the frame itself, it will be a clean cut all the way through. And that's better than having made a mistake and only cutting halfway through the cradle walls, then having to correct for it later with more cuts and lots of sanding. By setting the fence position correctly, with an extra 1/32 of clearance, I'm able to run both flush sides down the fence, cutting off the overhang on the opposite side. Since this panel is square, I only need to set the fence position once for this dirty little trick to work. With the panel glued up, and panel surface trimmed down to size, it's time to start nailing the surface to the cradle wall. I mark out even spacing for the nails beginning about 1 inch from the corners so I don't accidentally split the miter joint. I draw center lines over the area where the frame is located, underneath, and map out where I want to place the nails. For this next step we'll need a hammer, nails, and a nail set. These particular nails are 1-inch panel nails that have ridges down the side. They help grip the wood, once driven into the artist panel. Start by getting several nails lined up and ready to drive in. This may seem intuitive enough, but there's a technique to this that you may not be aware of, that will prevent you from making a mistake, this far along in the build. These nails drive in fairly easy, and don't require a lot of force to make them go down. Instead of swinging the hammer to hit the nail, I simply let the hammer drop onto the nail head using a straight down, tapping motion. Gravity is what's doing most of the work here, not my hand. To speed this video along, I'm going to show you the next step. Using a nail set, I drive the nail head just below the surface of the wood, using the same gentle tapping motion. 1/32 to 1/16 of an inch below the surface is enough. This is about how deep the nails should be set. All that's left to do now is nail in the corners of the panel walls, using the same technique we just used on the panel surface. I typically drive 3 nails per corner. 2 nails on one side and a single nail between the two, on the adjacent side. As seen here. Lastly, fill in the nail holes with filler, and sand down all the wood surfaces to your liking once dried. If you want to know how I do it, the link to that video is down below. That's it for today's video. I hope you all learned something useful. I'm 𝗪𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀, here to help you elevate your art and build for success. Till next time, take care. Yeah?